This is Republic and you're watching This Is Exclusive with me, Sharvin Sen. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight our focus on two stories. One, what's really happening in our neighboring country in Bangladesh, and why should India be concerned about it? Tonight on This Is Exclusive, we have the former Foreign Secretary, who's also been the High Commissioner to Bangladesh, Harsh Shringla, who will be joining us. The question that we are raising, whether at all there is any sort of foreign hand in the protests that are taking place in Bangladesh. 105 people have already lost their lives. Who exactly is responsible for the deaths that are taking place in Bangladesh? And why exactly should India be worried about the current situation? That's our top focus tonight. And the other story that we're going to get to you tonight is with regards to what's really happening in Jammu. And whether at all there is a cause of concern, because if you take a look at the number of attacks that have taken place, particularly in the Jammu belt, there was a point in time that Kashmir was largely seen as a hotbed for Pakistani terrorism. But that has shifted gears and it has now moved to Jammu. We'll explain tonight on This Is Exclusive why there is a change in tactics, and also that one defining image that we are bringing to you tonight. The training that takes place in Pakistan, the weapons that are being used by the Pakistani army is also found with the same terrorists who were gunned down. All this and much more in this edition of This Is Exclusive. But first, let's take you through the headlines we're tracking at this hour. After back-to-back terror attacks, high-level security meet held in Jammu, Army Chief present. Pakistan police cracks down on peaceful Hindu protesters demanding action in Priya Kumar abduction case. No end to unrest in Bangladesh. Sheikh Hasina now cancels all her foreign trips. Centre steps up efforts amid Bangladesh turmoil. More than 1,000 Indians repatriated. Train services from Kolkata to Dhaka stand suspended as unrest continues unabated. Ladies and gentlemen, in recent weeks, we've been seen back-to-back terror attacks that have actually taken place in the Jammu region. Now, as the Supreme Court set the deadline for the elections in Jammu and Kashmir, we see that there is a pattern that is taking place. Now, is it an attempt that the Pakistanis are once again making to foment trouble in Jammu and Kashmir? After the abrogation of Article 370, we saw that the number of terror activities in Kashmir, in the valley, has reduced substantially. Why is it that things are not really changing in Jammu? Why is it that it brings back memories of what we saw back in the 90s, particularly areas like Riyasi, Doda? These are places where attacks have taken place in 90 when terrorism was at its peak. So what has really changed? And how exactly is Pakistan playing a role in all of this? Tonight on This Is Exclusive, we are also going to get you a visual proof of how the Pakistani army is responsible for the attacks that have taken place in Jammu. But before that, take a look at this consolidated report that we're putting together for you to understand the number of attacks that have taken place and a clear pattern that is actually emerging.
The recent spike in terror attacks in Jammu and Kashmir has become a nationwide cause of concern. The valley has seen over 50 casualties in the last 33 months, as constant ambush on army personnel and residents is becoming a standard modus operandi of Pak-based terrorists. Since Prime Minister Modi took office in his third term on June 9th, over 10 terror incidents have taken place in Jammu and Kashmir in the last 40 days. From Riyasi on June 9th to repeated attacks in Doda, Poonch and Kathua. It is the Jammu belt that is emerging as the new epicenter of Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. After forces neutralized 2 terrorists in the search operations and encounter in the Keran sector of Kupwara just 2 days ago, Republic has accessed undeniable evidence of Pakistani army's involvement in sponsoring terror attacks across the border. In the cache of arms the army confiscated from the slain terrorists were multiple bullets and grenades, an AK-47 rifle and an AUG rifle with scope, the same make and kind used by Pak forces. Just last night, Home Minister Amit Shah had chaired a high-level meeting to review the deployment strategy of forces in the valley. Sources say that the forces are set to make major change in operational tactics in Jammu region, which has fallen prey to many terror attacks in recent weeks. With possible additional deployments on the horizon in Jammu, sources report that forces are expected to deploy smaller counter-terror operations to contain collateral damage while operating in Jammu.
Let's now first take you through the timeline of the attacks that have taken place in this very region. We'll also try and help you understand which are the places that we're really talking about. Let's take a look at it. This area that you're taking a look at is an area which has got dense foliage. This was on 18th of July where one terrorist was killed, and that's in Doda. It's in Doda itself just a few days later where 4 army personnel, they were killed in action. That happened on 16th of July, again at the same very place. I'll try and tell you why it's happening all in Doda, and then of course there are other places also. Let's move to the other areas where it has come in. In Kathua, that was on 8th of July where 5 army personnel were killed in action. 4 of them were also injured. Let's take a look at the other places. In Kulgam, 6 terrorists were killed, 2 army personnel, they were killed in action. This was again on 6th of July in Kulgam. In Baramulla, of course, that changes, the tactics actually change, but that's in the valley that we're looking at. 2 terrorists who were killed, 2 army personnel, they were killed in action. I beg your pardon, they were injured. On 18th of June in Poonch area, there was an exchange of fire because this is where the sightings actually took place. Terrorist sightings took place. There was an encounter that took place between the Jammu and Kashmir police, the Rashtriya Rifles, and of course you also had the paramilitary force being involved. Again, goes back to Doda where there was a gunfire that took place. 1 police personnel was injured. This was on June 12th. So if you see, starting from June to about July, the number of attacks that have taken place have increased substantially. Now this is not very far away from Doda where 2 terrorists were killed, 1 Jawan was killed in action, and 5 of them were injured. That's on 11th of June. 9th of June, Riyasi. 9 pilgrims were killed, 42 injured. Now, I'll just stay with this and I'll explain to you why Riyasi is very important. Now, back in the 90s, particularly in the year 1995 and thereafter, in Riyasi, the number of attacks that took place and some pockets where the searches were basically carried out, it never happened earlier. And there was an entire period where perhaps we did not see a single attack actually take place in Riyasi. But that has now completely changed. Now, in this edition of This Is Exclusive, we'll explain this to you too as to why Riyasi. Let's move on to the others that we have put together. Now, this is a consolidated report of the number of attacks that have taken place just between June and July. Now, let me also bring in my colleague Gursimran, who's joining us on this broadcast, and I'll also go across in a short while from now, take you through 2 images. Let's keep that ready. The image 1 is with regards to the training that is taking place in the Pakistani army base. We'll go full frame with that visual once that is ready. And the image that we've also accessed, now that is from Keran sector, where the recovery was actually made, and you will find that both the images are quite similar. Now, this that you see on your screen is Pakistani army training in one of their army base. Let's go full frame. Let's try and take this image, this video full frame, while Gursimran and I would be breaking it down for our viewers why we are showing this video, and then we'll take you through the other video that we have, the other image of the recovery that was made just about a few days ago. Now, let's put this into perspective, Gursimran. The image that we're putting out, this is of the recovery that was made. And the video that we showed a short while back, the same ammunition that is actually used, the same weapon that has been used by the Pakistani army, was recovered from Kiran sector.
Yes, Shravan, it is AUG satire that has been recovered from the terrorists of Lashkar-e-Toiba. To be very specific, they were PFF terrorists, that is an offshoot of Lashkar-e-Toiba, and they were in a bid to sneak in into the Indian territory. 3 terrorists were attempting to infiltrate, 2 were neutralized, and from them, this AUG satire, which uses the ammunition as same as the M4 carbine, that is a US-made rifle, it uses the same NATO 5.56 mm ammunition. This has been recovered, and now another video has surfaced that we have got to know from our sources within the establishment that this is the same weapon that the Pakistan's SSG uses. SSG is Special Services Group of the Pakistani Army, that is the trained commando, and also there are certain reports that have emerged that the terrorists that are fighting, that are in the upper reaches of the Doda as well as in Udhampur and Kathua, they are also SSG trained commandos. So it is very likely that the Pakistan is either sending the SSG commandos or the SSG trained commandos into the Indian territory, and the group that has been eliminated in the Kernan sector of the Kupwara based on the intelligence input of the Jammu and Kashmir police, that was also the same group, possibly the trained by the Pakistani SSG or itself an SSG commando that was trying to sneak in. This has been the modus operandi of the terror groups, that the group commander always carry a sophisticated weapon, be it M4, because the history of the M4 is something that the Jammu and Kashmir police saw for the first time in 2017 when the nephew of Masood Azhar was killed in the Pulwama. It was first attempt, it was the first major operation of the J&K police after revival of Jaish-e-Mohammed after 4 to 5 years in the Kashmir Valley. And then they saw that the terror groups are changing their modus operandi. They are no more restricted to the AK series rifle but are shifting to the advanced weapons. And yesterday also, after the recovery of the AUG style, when we spoke to the officials in the Indian Army, they said that the Pakistani terror groups are increasing their levels because they are getting a direct patronage from the Pakistani Army. If you remember, Shavan, it was on the 14th of June when we broke down the details that the Pakistani Army's, Pakistani Air Force and Pakistani Navy's official communication said the micro communication device was recovered from the terrorists that were killed on 13th of June in the Kathua district. Both were the Jaish-e-Mohammed terrorists, and when they were neutralized, it came into being that they were getting the active support from the Pakistani Army as they were holding the communication device of the Pakistani Army. So this entire modus operandi to destabilize Jammu and Kashmir, putting focus on the international border for Jaish-e-Mohammed line of control for the Lashkar-e-Toiba, Pakistani Army is trying to push as many as terrorists into the Jammu region so that they can disrupt the peace and can send a message that all is not well in Jammu and Kashmir. Shavan.
Well, thank you very much, Gursimran, for getting us the latest details. We have put out the visual evidence of the Pakistani link. The same very weapon which is used by the Pakistani Army for their training was found with the terrorists who were gunned down. Let's now take you through what's really happening in our neighboring country in Bangladesh. 105 lives have been lost in protests that have been taking place over the last 1 week. Protests are not only taking place in Dhaka but several other cities in Bangladesh. That's got a direct impact as far as India is concerned, where the rescue operation is also being carried out with about 50,000 Indians residing in Bangladesh. Roughly about 900 Indians have already been rescued. But we'll also look into the politics of it. Now, how exactly did the protests actually begin? Who is really behind it? Is there any foreign hand? All of this perhaps would be explained in a short while from now by the former Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla, who's also been the High Commissioner to Bangladesh. He'll be joining us in a short while from now. But before that, take a look at this report.
Nearly 1,000 Indian students evacuated from Bangladesh after protests over quota system in government jobs took a dramatic and violent turn. This led to a standoff between authorities and protesters, following which police resorted to using tear gas and batons to quell the protest. The protest began in Dhaka on 15th of July and within 5 days has resulted in an internet shutdown and thousands fleeing the nation. Meanwhile, 200 students from India, including 39 from Meghalaya, are being repatriated through the Sonamura border from Bangladesh. They are expected to arrive in Shillong by tomorrow morning. Following this, Republic spoke to Meghalaya Chief Minister Conrad Sangma. Listen to what he had to say.
slowly and steadily, most of the students and other citizens who are stuck there, including citizens from Bhutan and Nepal, have also managed to come through the Dauki port into Meghalaya and have safely again gone forward to their respective areas. And just about half an hour or 1 hour back, we also got some more positive news that students who were studying in the Eastern Medical College in Bangladesh, which is bordering Agartala, they have also managed to cross the border just about half an hour back. So that's another good news.
Amid the escalating protests, train services between Kolkata and Bangladesh have been cancelled. The protests, which began on July 15th in Dhaka, have spread across the nation, taking a violent turn, forcing Sheikh Hasina to deploy the military and announcing a nationwide curfew. Earlier today, officials announced that Sheikh Hasina has also cancelled a foreign visit to Brazil and Spain. Over 113 people have been killed during the protests in Bangladesh. As per reports, at least 300 police officers have been injured in the clashes in Dhaka. The action of the protesters have made it very clear they want to end the quota system and they are determined to continue the protest. Will Sheikh Hasina accept the protesters' demands and abolish the age-old reservation policy? Or will these escalating protests add to Hasina government's mounting troubles?
Getting at some more breaking news on this story. Chief Minister of Meghalaya has now put out the latest update with regards to the rescue operation. 37 Indian students have been brought from Bangladesh through the Sonamura border. In fact, these are images that have been put out by the Chief Minister, and he says that medical students from Bangladesh have safely crossed Sonamura border in Tripura. So just to understand, is there at all a foreign hand behind these protests? Let's understand one thing, that can these protests really be spontaneous in nature? However, having said that, Bangladesh in the past has also seen, as many would say, rich student protest, Bhasha Andolan to begin with, and several other protests that have taken place. But what's the nature of the kind of protests that are taking place, and the quota protests that we're talking about? We've seen the kind of face-off that Sheikh Hasina's government has had in the past too, in her previous term, as far as bringing back the quota is concerned. For more on this, I'm also joined in by our former Foreign Secretary. He's also had a rich experience in Bangladesh, served as the High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Mr. Harshvardhan Shringla is joining us on this broadcast. Mr. Shringla, thank you very much for joining us on Republic TV. Let me straight away begin by asking you the political nature of the protests that are taking place in Dhaka. It goes way beyond than what meets the eye right now of students being on the streets. Not to forget that, can we really forego the fact that the BNP and the Jamaat could also be behind it, the fact that there could be a foreign intervention, and I'll elaborate that in a short while from now, but I want your first preliminary understanding of what's currently happening in Bangladesh.
Thank you for having me on your show, Shavon. Now, to understand what the current situation is, I think we have to go back not just 5-6 days ago, but a couple of years ago. Students' protests have been happening in Bangladesh on various issues. One was on road safety. More recently, it was on the quota issue. And at that time, the government had given an assurance that quotas would be removed. But that order was stayed by the High Court, and now the matter is sub judice before the Supreme Court. So 5 or 6 days ago, students really came out, and what seems to be a very spontaneous protest to say that, look, it's 53 years since the independence struggle of 1971. And while it was understandable that, a certain number of seats were reserved for descendants of freedom fighters at that time, but it's time now to have a more level playing field, and it's time to do away with these quotas. Altogether, 56% of government posts are reserved for various categories, 30% for descendants of freedom fighters, 10% for backward districts, 10% for women, 5% for ethnic minorities, and 1% for physically challenged people. And so I think the protesters want to do away with all except the last two categories. And the government did, I think, understand where this was coming from. They were receptive to the concerns of the students, and they said, look, we will do away with the quotas. And the other day, Sheikh Hasina actually addressed the nation, in which she said that we are with you on the removal of quotas, but the courts have intervened, and we are obliged to go by the decision of the Supreme Court, which is expected to come out shortly. More recently, we heard that that decision might come as early as tomorrow from the Supreme Court. And of course, government has also offered a dialogue to the students. So what actually started as a genuine movement for students escalated into violence, has now become a larger movement. And I think elements that are inimical to the government, I mean, starting with the opposition BNP. The BNP, as you recall, did not participate in democratic elections held earlier this year. They instead prefer to agitate and to come out in the streets in this manner. So this is their opportunity, and they have tried to seize the moment. You also have certain radical elements, the Jamaat Shibir, which is the youth wing of the Jamaat-e-Islami, which some of us would recall actually sided with Pakistan during the 1971 war, and are considered to be a very radical force in Bangladesh politics, have also come out onto the streets supporting the student movement. There's also reports that we get from Dhaka, and to what extent this is correct, as I've always said, has to be verified by the Bangladesh government itself. But clearly, fishing in troubled waters is something that a lot of intelligence agencies, especially those that are inimical to the Bangladesh government, would try. So it's not surprising that the ISI, our neighbor Pakistan's intelligence service, the ISI, has some interest in fanning the flames of this particular movement. So it's become a larger exercise, become more violent. And I think, honestly speaking, hasn't been handled very well on either side. But the fact of the matter is, today seems to be escalating into an issue, into a situation where others have got into the game, and those elements are not necessarily the original elements. The students, who we all know are a manifestation of the sensitive index of any country, they're the ones who come out first, and they're the ones who are more vocal in voicing the concerns, and they're the ones that have the most to gain or lose, because, I mean, obviously the quota system, gave them only a certain number of seats to which they could access. So there are certain concerns. Some of them are genuine, and the government seemed to be receptive. But today the situation has taken a different turn and has become, the dynamics have changed.
Like, can we really ignore Pakistan-China axis on this entire matter, given the fact that we have seen in the past too, how Pakistan has essentially tried to meddle with these issues? One of the reasons why Sheikh Hasina in the past had called those who were participating in the protests as Razakars. And with Razakars reference being brought in, there was a clear link, or a clear hint, that Sheikh Hasina was sending across to Pakistan. Let's not forget the significance of the word used by Sheikh Hasina in the past, particularly using the word Razakars for those participating in the protest.
Well, in 1971, while majority of the population were subject to Pakistani brutality, there was a small section that supported Pakistan, and those were referred to as Razakars. And actually, it is this section that was involved in some of the heinous human rights violations, killings, and crimes that were committed in 1971. The genocide of 1971 can be ascribed both to the Pakistani army and Razakars. And so, from that perspective, I think Pakistan's link to this West Pakistan element continues to remain even today. They have strong links with the Jamaat-e-Islami. They have strong links with the Razakar element. They have strong links with those who even today, have not lost the sentiment of being a part of Pakistan. And there is a section of that country which is also associated with the BNP, the opposition party, which I think really has pro-Pakistan interests in mind. And I think Sheikh Hasina was referring to these interests, which are basically inimical to the country's growth, development, prosperity, and really don't represent, the majority sentiment of the country. But they are capable of doing a lot of damage. They are obviously can, marshal resources that are surprisingly intact even now. And I can only ascribe it to the support that they get from, countries that have an interest in seeing this group now. And you have to also remember that Sheikh Hasina, when she came to power in 2008, from that time onwards, she has gone after these Razakars, after the pro-Pakistan element who have committed genocide in that country. And correctly so, because popular sentiment really felt that since 71, justice has not been served. So we're talking about retributive justice today. And she has really, ensured that a number of Razakars were tried for war crimes, and some of them were hung. Some of the main leaders were also executed. So they have a grouse, and this is their time to get even. I mean, both Pakistan and the Razakars.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Harsh Shringla, for joining us on This Is Exclusive and putting this into perspective, as many would say that this is not just a mere student protest that we are really looking at, but the fact that there could be a possible foreign hand, given what we have seen in the last few days and also just before the elections that took place in Bangladesh. That's all that we could pack in this edition of This Is Exclusive. As we also get you more details of what's really happening in Bangladesh and the direct impact that it has in India. We'll take you through all the details with our rolling coverage, getting you live reports all the way from Bangladesh. But that's all that we could pack in this edition of This Is Exclusive.